Hi, my name is Vel Johnson with Visage Communications, founder and CEO of the full service public relations consultancy here in Orlando. And we're just so honored to have with us today clinical psychotherapist, licensed mental health counselor, and professor of psychology at St. Petersburg College, Dr. Carlia East. Dr. East, how are you today?
I am doing well, Val. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited about some of the information that we're going to share with the audience today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. Well, here we are, and we've been considering a season of trauma with this pandemic we've experienced for the last few months. And and now it seems that the trauma has been compounded with additional stressors related to the recent occurrence connected to the death of George Floyd.
Mhm.
My initial question to you today is, how do we adequately process all of these multiple traumas that it seems that we're experiencing and be
Mhm.
able to still function properly?
Oh boy, that is a complicated, layered question, but I will try to keep, the answer as tangible as possible. The truth of the matter is that we are going to continue to be re-traumatized by these events. The trauma from COVID, the pandemic, self-isolation or self-quarantining, as you will say, we've gotten kind of lost in that translation where there's been so much trauma of the ability to have our own individuality, our own power, our own strengths, because we've been told, where we can and can't go, what we can and can't do, and we're kind of, stuck in our homes and our daily routines have been interrupted. So you have multiple levels of different traumas, as you will, in that category by itself, because those general freedoms, right, have been kind of taken away from us for a period of time. And for some of us, we're still living underneath those, expectations. Then
Right.
when you add on top of that um, a level of racism that also exists on the bottom of that. So it's not just as if we are dealing with, oh, we have a crisis of a pandemic and now we have this racial issue. There's been this ongoing racial issue. There's been a racial epidemic in our communities, and that has been going on for, since the beginning of time. And
Right.
so there still is this underlining area that was already there for so many of us. And then we've added on another level of isolation, and now we've added on another level of abuse on top of some of the isolation. And it is difficult to see through that. It's the same premise as if you have a wound and there's something inside of it that's not allowing it to heal properly. Eventually you're going to have to open that up and get that out in order for
Right.
you to heal. And what's happening is with this compounding of emotions, this compounding of trauma, it is going to be essentially a difficult task to just see your way out of this at this point. This is going to take a mindfulness of each and every person in our African American community to be aware to not be a statistic. And that is where the difficulty lies, because we are indeed traumatized. We do feel these improprieties on a daily basis. And then yet, we are also this resilient, very strong culture. And we have such strength in our DNA, right? And we have such compassion and such forgiveness as a
Right.
culture. And I
Absolutely.
think that those are the areas that we have to be mindful of not to lose. I'm not saying don't be proactive. I'm not saying to that you shouldn't march, you shouldn't protest, but I think we have to be very smart,
Right.
and I think we have to be very socially strategic in
Right.
the way that we choose to combat, these, negatives and these just outright inequalities that are happening in our communities. But it starts with first of us recognizing that we are pissed and recognizing that we are angry, we're hurt, we're sad, we're fearful. I'm a wife with an African American husband, and I have a African American male child that we are raising in this environment. And so I am very aware of the lessons that I have to teach him and the things that I have to educate him on. But I'm also aware of the love that I have to teach him and the forgiveness that I have to teach him and the, certain levels of tolerance that I have to teach him, because I'm teaching him about humanity, right?
Right.
Not just the anger and not just the disparity, but how to find that equality without putting yourself as an unequal, without becoming the stereotype. And so we have to remember those balances between the positives and the negatives and rely on those. And then next, I think we have to remind ourselves of how resilient we are as a culture, and then use, again, be very strategic in using our social media platforms as a way to catapult our voices in a very smart way, in a very educational and, you know, well-presented way, so that we're not just clapping back, right? We're not just popping off. Like, we understand exactly what we're saying. We understand the legitimacy. We understand the rights. We understand the declarations. We understand those things. So, you know, that's where I see as a culture that we can use our voices to expound. And honestly, in this state that we're in right now, with still some practices of self-quarantining and 6 feet, and using social media hugely right now, right, as our primary methods of communication, the time is now to
Right.
do that, to get
Absolutely.
those messages out there. And what that does is that instills in our communities, in our children even, it gives them a map of how to handle these disparities, because they're not going to fade away. But it gives them a map on how to handle this. It gives them a blueprint, because right now we've kind of lost our blueprint, so to speak. And I think it's important that we start investing in those areas and getting those things back. And that, again, will empower us.
Absolutely. Wow. I definitely agree. You know, it's about being able to communicate effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think about it, you know, most of us African American women have a strong connection to a Black man in our lives, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's our father, our uncle, our brother, our child. So I guess in my mind, I'm wondering, how can I be sure that I'm saying the right thing to the African American male, man or boy in my family or my friend? You know, I want to say something to make him feel better. I know I can't change the situation, but is there anything in particular that you could suggest to me as a Black woman, in more effectively communicate with the Black male in my life?
Absolutely. That I know how to do. So honestly, what it boils down to is changing the context of the language to the person that you're speaking it to. So, you know, the way that I communicate with my husband is different than the way I communicate with my son. There's an age difference. And so the number one thing that you have to make sure, especially when educating our children, especially our young males, right? We have to be mindful of the language that they're able to understand, because we want to make them aware, but we also don't want to kill their hope. And so I think being mindful of how you say things. So when I'm speaking to my son about, you know, the current events that are happening with our culture or with anything in our society, I am very transparent, but I use, you know, very basic terms: good people, bad people, no matter what they're dressed as, no matter what they look like. And I try to give him those examples as well, and give him alternative examples, because I want my son to be balanced. I definitely want him to be aware. I want him to be aware of his power that he holds, you know, just within his DNA and within his brain capacity. But I also want him to be fair. And so my messaging to him is always one of more fairness, showing him equal size, because his brain is still developing, right? And I am, you know, as his parents, we are responsible for how that brain develops in some form. So I would say that when you're dealing with smaller children, make it appropriate, and then balance it out on both sides, you know, just because you don't want your child to become jaded on one end or the other. For adults, I think the one thing that we can't do is make them feel better. That is what we want to do. That's what we yearn to do, but this is not a make you feel better situation. You know, this is a, once I receive justice, I can live with it, but I won't necessarily feel better, right, about it. And so I think when speaking to grown men and even teens, adolescents that are aware, you have to just be transparent about the fact that this is upsetting. And then you start talking about, so how do you not become a statistic? What can we do? How can I support you in the voice that you want to have? Is there something you want to do? Is there a message you want to get across? And allow our Black men, and I don't mean to use the word allow, but back off and let them voice what they're feeling. We cannot always rescue or try to think we can come in and rescue them. There are certain times where we just need to be that support. And that means allowing the space to take place where they can speak and they can voice themselves. And you let them know that that is hard. You acknowledge the fact that there are places that we are able to go as Black women that our Black men can't go. It's the reality of the situation. There's looks that my husband gets that I don't get. And we're in the same store at the same time together, and I'm aware of that. I will never know how that feels for him, just as he will never know how the inequalities of being a woman feels for me. Right. But what I can do is support, acknowledge, heck yes, say it's wrong, and then both of us discuss how we are going to manage our feelings and how we're going to educate our son, and then what we want to do in the community if that's something that you want. So I really think it's a matter of us allowing the grief and the anger to take place and being there as a support and a sounding board, more so than a fixer.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, because we're not fixers, are we?
Right, and the pain is real. The
really
pain is real.
And the pain really spreads to other communities and cultures as well, from a different vantage point, of course, because Absolutely. Someone who is not in the same skin that we're in can't personally relate to the challenges that we're experiencing.
Right.
But what recommendations would you make on the global level as we are going through this very uncomfortable and unsettling time in our society? What suggestions would you make, just for everyone, across the board?
Well, the first thing that I honestly say is that we have to have a good sense of self. We really do. We have to have a good cultural sense of ourselves, of our identity, of our positivity, because the negativity that happens and the pain and the suffering that we see on a consistent basis globally weighs on us. Weighs on us all individually in our own ways, but it is still a weight. And that weight begins to change our self-perception first. Then it begins to change the way we look at others. Then it begins to change the way we globally see ourselves in this world. Do you see? It's like a really bad domino effect that takes place. But it starts from changing the way we see ourselves. So we have to be honest about how we're viewing ourselves. And then we have to remind ourselves, each individual, of our greatness, of our accomplishments, of the things that we do. And I'm not talking about accolades and degrees. I'm talking about getting up and making food for your kids every day. I'm talking about homeschooling when you couldn't figure out the computer system. I'm talking about still saying good morning to your neighbors, no matter what race they are, in spite of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Those are moments to be proud of, because you are still recognizing that there is still humanity out there. We cannot forget that. So, number one is really self-check how you are being changed and altered emotionally, and then remind yourself of all the positivity, and then surround yourself with that positivity. I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place to be angry, because there is. There isn't a time and a place for that, but you cannot live there. Right. You can't live there and prosper. You cannot live there. So definitely I would say do that. And then also, again, I want to go back to this. Use your social media. Use your voice. We can post about this and post about that, and we can post about shoes, and we can post about memes of this, and we can post about tragedies that happen. Let's post about some successes. Let's post
Absolutely.
about some positive outcomes that are actually happening, you know, in our legislature and in our governments. Let's post about those positives, because that inspires people to keep going.
Right. Right.
It's when we don't see those things that we're constantly bombarded with the negative, which is, you know, again, negative information strategically keeps people down. No matter what race or gender they're from, it holds you in a mental state of negativity. It stops your neurons from firing and from your greatness, you know, happening. So we have to do better globally at inputting positive data, positive information, positive stories, memes, things, accomplishments that happen, so that the inspiration of hope, that mustard seed, continues to inspire all of us, so that we have the motivation, the willpower, the intellect, right? And the tools to continue to fight this fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it wholeheartedly. We really do have to do better. And, you know, I think we're just very fortunate to have someone of your caliber to be able to share with us and give us insight onto how we can move forward and do better. I
Right.
guess the final question would be, for those who are trying their hardest to do that, but yet they're experiencing issues related to, say, depression and anxiety and sleeplessness, and they
Mhm.
feel that they need a little extra assistance just to be able to cope,
Mhm.
how could they find you if they're interested in maybe utilizing your services?
Okay. Well, so I am a therapist. I'm licensed in the state of Florida, right? And so I want to be clear that if there's counseling, deep-rooted counseling that you want, definitely in the state of Florida, reach out to me. If you're on the out of the state of Florida, then there's some coaching opportunities that I can provide there. But if we're looking strictly for the counseling, you can reach me at 727-569-6305. Smile Psychology and Associates is my company. I am the CEO, and it is a group practice where we provide, of course, virtual services as well as telehealth, virtual services, as well as even some face-to-face services for those that feel comfortable. And we focus on children all the way through adults. We, you know, take different types of insurances, EAPs. So it's just a matter of really reaching out. You can definitely check us out at our website, smilepsychology.com, or you can Google me, you know, Dr. East Smile, and it will easily pop up. But the bottom line is to reach out to someone, even if it's not to me. It's to reach out to someone and start having a conversation about how you're feeling. When we bottle things up, that's when we allow it to grow. It's like a fungus. It festers and it grows and it poisons. And that's what secrecy and things that we keep in our hearts and our minds does to us. It poisons us in a way that we are not as productive as we should be, in a way that we don't think things through like we should. And so reaching out and talking and processing, getting those things out is not a weakness. That is the first step in your strength. And I think, you know, reframing that and understanding that it's just a tool for you to use to be your best and to do what you feel like your purpose is intended to do, then why not invest in that? So, you know, reach out to somebody, talk it out, write it out, but definitely reach out.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, Dr. East, it's been such a joy being able to speak with you today about an issue that's of primary concern, you know, for so many of us. Uh,
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule,
Thank you.
and we look forward to hopefully being able to chat with you again sometime very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I look forward to it, Val.
Thank you. Thank you again. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.